So the first thing that I had in my notes about the chapter that I liked was that the DSM-5 covers clients' concerns in all four um I can't hear my own in all four d domains. A
Mhm.
client, which is a client's experience, their mood, which is their mood, cognitions, behavior, and physiology, which I liked. And I like that it put them into those four categories 'cause I feel like sometimes it feels like it's very broad and it covers so much. So it's good to see like actual categories being described so you kind of know where things should be put instead of it kind of just feeling like it's going all over the place.
Right. I guess I don't know why, but I've never like kind of looked at the like DSM-5 and kind of tried to even understand why they put it in the order they did. But like at reading through it, I was like, that makes total sense of like these you're more likely to see the first part of their life and like kind of continue on throughout like their someone's life. And I was like, that makes complete sense of like kind of like when you'll see it and when most likely it'll be diagnosed. Because
Mhm.
then as I like think about like when I'm working with a client, then it's going to be easy if I'm like, oh, this is typical for like early on, in like someone's life to be diagnosed. I know it's like in the first part of the book versus like just flipping through and
Alzheimer's
like hoping
last
to
part of the book.
find it.
Yeah, not to mention things that, begin in childhood, but then transition to another disorder later in life, like conduct becoming bipolar once you reach past a certain age. So it just helps to flow those things together, which, yeah, you're right, it makes it easier to categorize things.
Well, and I even like the combination of slightly different disorders, but have similar criteria that
Mhm.
are connecting. Like I said, they even put those together where if you look here and you go, well, not everything's there. Let me go right to the next pages. Go, okay, that's not truly, schizophrenia, but it fits some bipolar and over here. So you can connect them together pretty easy without having to, because some of the books, I know you're going all the way this way and you're going all the way this way and you're trying to put it all together. It's a lot easier when you're just flowing right through.
Yeah.
So, sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because like you can look at acute stress disorder and it has similar symptoms to PTSD, but then there's like that certain criteria that makes it differ from one another. So I like how it kind of goes really in depth in both, so that way you can genuinely see the difference between the two.
And how like it was built to include those like immediate short-term and time-limited problems versus ones that were consistent and to show how there is a specific distinct break in those durations and how the difference between 1 week and 2 week can lead from acute to major depressive disorder, which I think is like when you're like thinking about it, it's like, oh, like well, that's not a big difference. But then in someone's like capacity and within their brain functioning, it does make a severe difference if there is a week of continuation or no continuation as well.
And along those same
I
lines,
also like how they like kind of really, oops, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
oh, no, sort of along those same lines about like, recognizing how nebulous these things are because minds are nebulous, right? We're not as um, uh, black and white as you are either a light switch on or off, you know. But so many of the diagnoses have, a key component being that it has to be disruptive to your life somehow. So you could have all of the symptoms or aspects of this thing, but that's marking the difference between what is like a just a trait of someone and what is actually something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, because for example, like insomnia,
Right.
I have trouble sleeping every single day. Like I have to watch a podcast to fall asleep. Do I think it stems from my anxiety in a little bit? For sure. But I also just think it's because keep myself up to 2 a.m. because I like watching TV. And it's just how I've always done my entire life. Like it's not because of one specific thing. It's just a trait of mine. That one aspect might make it a little worse on some nights, but it's not because of major depressive disorder or PTSD or anything. It's just because keep myself up late. So that's like important to know why someone has a lack in their diet or insomnia or different types of these symptoms because truly sometimes it is just their body and they might not even know that. And I think that's why counseling is very important because you might not even know that your insomnia is just because you just have trouble sleeping and it's not actually stemming from a disorder.
Right.
And I liked how kind of hitting on both of that, like it segues right into what I was gonna say. I liked how it kind of focused also on the like different things that are not uh like mental disorder diagnosis. So like grieving the loss of a loved one, even though like yes, it is disruptive to someone's life, kind of like insomnia, it could be disruptive to someone's life, but it there are certain things that are not like the DSM list, like these are not like a diagnosable mental disorder. And it does make me wonder like how often do people like just like get a diagnosis, whether it's for like billing for insurances or whatever, when they go to counseling, like how often are like people being diagnosed with something in order to kind of like meet the like criteria for like billing for like insurance purposes. But I don't know because I don't know like what is
Often, in my
these are just
experience,
thoughts I had as I'm reading the chapters.
I worked in
What?
Indiana for a while under the Medicaid system, and so often I heard stories of people trying to get, for instance, autism diagnoses in order to get services for this specific thing. Um, and sometimes you had kids that were maybe on that borderline of, do you actually fit into the diagnostic criteria for this specific label? But you put them in there because the kid still needs the services for this, that, or the other. And you need that label to get that thing.
Yeah. So I do love your 2 points, Shauna. One is normal circumstance, normal effects of a circumstance, not a true long-term issue or diagnosable problem. And then also, I love Kyle. I was reading on it with what you were saying. It says, be careful not to choose a diagnosis because it works for billing or circumstances. And as I'm reading it, I'm going, why don't we address both sides of the issue? I know they're presenting this to us like, hey,
Mhm.
here it is in the book, don't do it correctly, do it the right way, even if that means you don't get paid or billing issues or things may come up. But at
Right.
the same time, if we want to eliminate those problems, advocacy's got to happen on a state level that says,
Literally.
stop putting us in a corner and
Right.
give us options
Stop
so
being
that
so
we can
restricted.
truly help people without giving the wrong diagnosis, just so we can get them what they need covered by insurance.
And I
Yeah.
could see that being a barrier as well if
Oh, yeah.
the insurance is not going to cover it unless they have a specific diagnosis. If we're on the fence and we don't give a diagnosis, then it's going to create a barrier to their treatment if they're like, well, I can't pay out of pocket for this because I don't have this diagnosis, even though I'm kind of there, but I'm kind of not. So I also don't want to create more barriers, especially like in a rural area where I live. I don't want to have additional barriers to individuals trying to seek treatment because of a diagnosis label.
Sort
Yeah.
of those ethical things you got to balance, you know?
Yeah, and then it's like hard because it's like, do we have any like grief counselors in our areas that can take on this client? And then it's like, if we don't, then it's like hard because you have to keep seeing them, even though they really do just need that short term counseling to focus on that one issue. And then it's also like the terms of medication, like, oh, do they need medication for this? And then I feel like it's a stigma around sometimes therapy. It's like, oh, you need medication once you get into therapy. And the minute a doctor hears that you have a therapist, they will give out that medication like candy. They do not care. They don't. I went to get anxiety medication, which I actually did need, but the fact that my doctor didn't even ask me who my therapist was, like nothing. She was just like, gotcha. It's already at the CVS for you. Like she did not ask any questions. She just took my word that I was seeing a therapist, which is honestly so scary and dangerous because I could not have actually been in therapy and just wanted to get like random meds. That's also like when it comes to like the daily life experiences and the culture experience and the expected experiences, like what line do we draw when it's like, hey, I will give you counseling, but I will not recommend medication for you, and where a doctor would be like, oh yeah, like I won't give you medication either, or will they just take a client's word for it? Because sometimes like a client may want medication to numb the pain of what they're feeling, even though like this is not something that's technically diagnosable either. And that's when other disorders such as addiction can stem from the grief and the cultural experiences and the daily life experiences. And then a diagnose can actually stem from these non-diagnosable terms given the improper treatment.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Big pet peeve of mine is that, hey, we'll just give you out meds, whether you got a therapist or not. Hey, go see one. And then you never follow up on it. And they've got meds for 5 more years without doing anything else but just medication.
Right.
Then
That
we're
was
just
actually
slapping a Band-Aid on it and hoping
Right.
it's just gonna go away.
Yeah,
Like
definitely a
medication
Band-Aid on a
does
bullet
not
wound.
actually help unless you're actively doing therapy. Like medication allows you to go into therapy with a clear, open mind,
Exactly.
actually
A
use the tools.
short-term solution.
But if you don't actually go to therapy, the medicines like maybe might help, but like you're not gonna understand why it's helping. Same like sometimes you do need medication with therapy because you can go to therapy, but you can't rework your brain to make the things make sense. But I don't think it should ever just be like, I don't think meditation should really just be a one and done. I get sometimes for ADHD, but I still even with ADHD, maybe even just see someone to talk about how you are using the medication and what you see to be helpful. Because some people just say they have ADHD just to get that medicine, just so they can write a paper at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, the goal should always be like the least amount of medication that
And
is
to never
needed
be
for
on it
the
forever.
Yeah.
right, or at least the least amount. Again, in some cases you do need that, but um, yeah, to minimize that effect because therapeutic techniques don't have as many side effects, for example.
Right. And also you kind of have to think about it too, like when an individual will have like symptoms that's so relatively close to another disorder, they can get misdiagnosed. So that way, when they find out that they have been misdiagnosed, they've already went through, like you said, like the medications, different types of therapy, billing issues, and then come to find out that they were misdiagnosed. It's kind of like, oh, well, I have to start all over again because I was getting treated for A, B, C, and D, but I need to get treated for D, E, and F.
Hmm.
Right. And I think that's kind of where sometimes just prescribing medication without coupling like counseling into it is super dangerous because there's so many, especially females, that if they like state some of the like effects or symptoms they're having, doctors will be like, oh, that's just anxiety or depression
Yeah.
when it actually is ADHD. So sometimes because if you're on anxiety or like depression medicine, it's like the medication they prefer to prescribe those medications versus the controlled substances most of the time. So it's very tricky, but I think if someone is going to a counselor and like can has more than like the whatever 15 minutes with a doctor, they
Right.
can actually get a proper diagnosis and try to work on some like changes within their lifestyle versus just relying on medication.
Right.
Yeah. And then I also read that stood out to me, it was that codependence and sex addictions were not disorders, which I honestly found shocking because I feel like I can see addictions. I guess I can see that not being a disorder, but I still can see how it like can disrupt someone's life and create other impacts in their life from that. And then codependence, I would honestly argue that that is a disorder because if you like Maria, which I talked to her for Learning Activity 2.2, you took away her love and it wrecked her entire life and caused her so much grief. And I feel like codependence can really send someone into a spiral. So I guess maybe not disorder, but I feel like it should be honestly more talked about in the DSM-5 because I've seen some people who have been codependent and the minute that person was taken away, it really did create an issue. Like I think of Norman Bates, the Mormon hotel show with him and his mother.
Hmm.
Well, but this is why I went closer to separation anxiety. Well, no, I'm sorry, wrong case. We were talking about the kids. That was something else. Um, but I could see some other anxiety disorders fitting into that because the results of being separated from somebody, what you're talking about, the effects fitting into more of those. So,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that I hadn't thought of, Kayla, is the codependency being like, even though it's not a diagnosable thing, the depression disorder, the anxiety perhaps stem from that kind of central issue,
Right.
but you can't bill for it because it's not a diagnosable thing. So that's maybe an example of you got that down on the chart that you send to insurance, but like what you're actually addressing is this other thing. Again, that sort of ethical balance.
Yeah.
Um,
You see it
I
even with
know
dogs that
with
are like brothers. Like you take one brother away, the other dog literally can die of heartbreak.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shauna, go ahead.
yeah, okay. And I know it's I have like 5+ years with like as a substance use director. So I know gambling disorders or gambling addiction is now like included, but that's just kind of been within the last couple of years. So I definitely foresee them like adding to the like different addictions where before it was kind of mostly just reliant on alcohol and substances. But I know Kyle, you're kind of in that field as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, if you feel like it's just kind of a matter of time before other addictions are kind of continuing to be added, or if you think it's kind
Yeah,
of going to stay the same.
I think it's interesting that then I think in our previous like substance use, I think it was in the fall, the that class talking about all the different models of how one looks at substance abuse and the history of that, it going from like a this moral approach to medical, and now it's sort of branching off into what is probably the truth, which is a swath of like a variety of different factors, right? So I think as we are growing our understanding of that, we're also growing this idea of, oh, it can also be behavioral things, not just something that I take to chemically alter. I can chemically alter with the things that I do. And that has the result is the same regardless of where you get it from.
Right.
So I think it will continue to change. And I would bet probably in the DSM-6, sex addiction is probably going to be added to that.
Biopsychosocial.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Learning activity 2.2. Does anyone have the questions at the moment pulled up? If not, I will go for
Yeah, I
it.
wrote them down.
Okay.
Same here.
I forgot to keep in my screen earlier
Oh,
too.
you're good.
Okay, amazing. I was like small little notes when I was reading it earlier. Um, the main thing I got from the overview of it was that the counselor saw it as grief was the focus, and then everything else was stemming from her grief, which is why she gave her the acute diagnosis. And the one thing that reason why I did not fully agree with the acute diagnosis, because I feel like there's a lot of things that she was not putting two and two together on, especially for her from her cultural experience. It was kept saying how she wants to go back to Puerto Rico, how this is not the life she thought she was gonna live. And I feel like that's a reason why I would not label it acute diagnosis, and I would really look up about Maria's culture and ask her more questions about that, because I feel like overall she might just not be having the best time in America, and she's missing her family and she's not understanding everything that's going on in her new surroundings. I feel like it's not just grief that is making her feel, I think, alone. It's just the thing that maybe blew it up to where she needed to see a counselor about it. But I don't think it just started with the death of her love. I think it has stemmed since she moved from Puerto Rico to the States.
Because of that cultural importance on family and community and stuff, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was also gonna say too, I think for me, from when I was reading it, I feel like her pregnancy was like overlooked because like there were some times when I was reading it and I had to reread it. I'm like, wait a minute, she's pregnant. Like, because I didn't like at the time when I was reading everything with the grief and loss, also the fact that she's going to struggle as, a teen mom, but also dealing with loss, and that her baby is going to be a constant reminder of the love that she will never be able to have again in her life. And then also like they will never experience the father in their life.
What I thought, the main reason why she had the acute stress disorder is just because of the time frame, since it has been less than a month from her
Yeah.
living that traumatic experience and having all the like different symptoms from it. So how she feels that like she's not like she's numb, has like a lack of feelings. She doesn't have, I guess I have to look at my answers, not the questions. Um, but the anxiety, the nightmares, the derealization. So just because prior to when her parents wanted her to come back to Puerto Rico when he was still alive, she was like, not like she wanted to stay.
Yeah.
But since he has now been killed, now she's like, maybe I just want to go away. So I don't know if she's just trying to like escape the like feelings and the like trying to like grieve through it and just trying to like kind of put like blinders to it and be like, I'll deal with this later. Like hold the beach ball underwater. We're not going to talk about it right now. Um, but that was kind of my thoughts that I agreed with the acute stress disorder just because of the traumatic situation and the symptoms she's experiencing, and since it's been under a month, that's why it wouldn't be the PTSD. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know, Derek, what did you think on it?
No, I agreed with that.
Okay.
I, like you said, it's not a long-term situation, and also it kind of flows right into the second question too. On the next part is connecting it to the circumstances makes it a little bit different. Because the next question is, why do the characteristics of Maria's presenting concerns pertaining to her grief about the loss of her boyfriend fall outside the scope of a mental disorder diagnosis? And you alluded to this earlier, that it is a natural response to a death of, have grief of somebody who you had a child with, that you were connected with. So that has to take into account that, oh, they're presenting the symptoms, but is this natural for the situation? So when you go with the acute, you know what I mean? It's a shorter term, that kind of stuff. So I agree with you. And then on this, it's a natural grief response. So you can't really diagnose it until you see it longer term, same situation, and it presenting itself in continued symptoms, not just connected to a natural grief.
Right. And so that's why you believe that at some point it might turn into symptoms of PTSD.
Good. But the initial, you kind of stay away from it because you don't want to misdiagnose it.
Right. Yeah, of course. You have to wait for the severity to keep on going, prolonging, say, like 6 months to a year, because like you said, grief and loss is a natural response for us as humans. But the only way it comes like an implication of our lives and like how we function is if we actually allow it to impair us in like if we get up out of bed, if we even feed ourselves, if we clothe ourselves, if we take a shower. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and I feel like appropriate responses to grief can be varied and tricky, in that sort of multicultural way of people grieve and process loss in a lot of different ways, both individually and like stylely. So yeah, in defense of the acuteness of it, that yeah, I feel like that is it takes a long time to even identify this is inappropriate now. This has gone on for too long, or this is getting more severe in these ways that are hindering your ability to function.
Well, in one of the other classes, we're doing media stuff, and I'm sitting here thinking about the sad part is media in movies and other stuff typically goes from this point all the way to like some crazy point where somebody's killing people over their grief that's turned into something crazy. And now they're a serial killer and they're doing all this stuff. Like that's the way movies go, is sometimes there's no middle. It's from here to all the way out to an
Right.
extreme
Yeah.
situation. And that's
And we've absorbed that from childhood,
the
you know.
So the next question was, how did the counselor indicate that grief and loss was not a diagnosable, but still would be the focus of counseling?
Yeah, no, they had listed in there like the immediate goal was to like work on the treatment plan. But the like kind of a longer term goal, um, eventual goal they had listed is to resolve the grief and loss issues in individual like counseling as well as support groups. So it was kind of listed as that like eventual goal, but like right away we want to work on our like immediate goal of creating the treatment plan and like kind of working on that acute stress disorder.
Because
Right.
to get to the end goal is you have to work on all the little snippets that are creating the overall big picture. Because if you don't get rid of the snippets of the big picture won't go away.
Right.
um, Focused on what you're doing, right? That's why both goals and outcomes are part of treatment plans. It's like here's the horizon of what we want, and then here are each little tiny thread that we have to pull on in order to get to that place.
One, and also goes back to what Kayla was talking about. The presenting symptoms was the loss, and the grief is the initial, and that's going to create the layers after. So yeah, let's focus on that first and then see what we can do with the rest of it. So
Right. Yeah, that's basically what I had written down anyway.
next question or keep going here.
You're good. Keep
What would it
going.
mean to do? What would it mean to you as a counselor to learn that Maria's symptoms were described as acute stress disorder? And what would you know about the types of symptoms she was experiencing? What type of life events had she experienced? And about the time frame of her difficulties. And I think we kind of went over a lot of that right there.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say what you
Yeah.
mentioned before, Derek, like, well, one, she had witnessed the murder of her boyfriend and then brutal beatings of her friends, because she was relatively close to the gang, and which pertained to what you said earlier, is that it was such a short amount of time that it happened, because we got the record of it, what, being a month ago that it happened for her?
Within a month.
Yeah, within a month. So from that alone, like I said, with the time frame of everything, that's I mean, that's a lot to experience in just a short amount of time. And then probably, I don't know if it said it specifically, but when she found out she was pregnant alone, that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
I guess, like taking this question in a different way, I guess, since you already covered a lot of it, is as a counselor, hearing that acute diagnosis, I guess my goal and as hearing that diagnosis would be to stop it from developing and keep it
In the
at
long term.
keep minimizing it, knowing that we're at the acute stage right now. Because what you don't want is for it to then develop into something bigger. So I guess that's what I would see that diagnosis as a counselor. Okay, I have a starting plan. I need to minimize where we're at and not letting go forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of answers the last question down here. If you were Maria's intake counselor, how comfortable would you be with the diagnostic impressions found in her case illustration? And to follow up with what you all were saying is you find a way to attach it to the diagnosis of the acute stress disorder and then be able to focus on the grief. And then, like you said, hopefully we can get through this process to where that diagnosis may be able to be taken back because it's considered acute. So then that may be able to be taken away later versus a full-on stigmatized, you have stress disorder every time you go somewhere and they're like, what's going on with your stress disorder? And you're like, I don't even have a problem anymore. Why do you keep bringing it up? Like I'm
Right.
dead right now.
Right. It would be considered as like a, a severe stress disorder, say pertaining like before this event, like say if she was constantly stressed about other negative impacts in her life before this event, but there was never any record of that. It all happened when she lost her boyfriend and her friends.
Yeah.
And I also think it's important to note that like no matter how wonderful our treatment plans and like goals and objectives are going to be, the like progression of some of the like clients and their disorders are going to be based on like their willingness to participate. Because it sounds like she was not very willing to participate.
She wasn't.
Right.
So no matter how wonderful our treatment plan could be, like if she's not ready, um, it might lead to PTSD and despite how wonderful we are as counselors. And that's something that like we have to be prepared for is like, yeah, we don't want it to go there because we know what that means, but we can't control um their willingness to engage.
Yeah.
We can only put the fire out so much, but they have to be willing to walk out of that burning building as well if we can.
Oh, what's that saying? My mom always said, you can lead a horse to water, but it's up to them if they want to drink it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um,
I think that's gonna be a hard realization as we go along. It's just to be able to say, I've done what I can. There's not much more I can do right
And
now.
that can be a part of compassion sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm.
That, okay, you need to live the experience a little bit more. I was talking to someone about that idea of you can't lead a horse to water, or all that. And then they did an add-on of like, if you try to force the horse to drink water, you can end up drowning it. Which,
Oh.
yes, I don't know how much that tracks, but I thought it was interesting.
Or it might end up attacking you.
Or they
It
end up,
might
they
kick
end up
you.
fighting back, right? And
but I
yeah,
mean, if you look at like I did substance use counseling because I was certified through the state of Michigan, but it's kind of like there are times where like, yeah, it's wonderful. Like I wanted everyone to obviously reduce their illegal substance use. And sometimes like we just got like the seasoned counselors were always like, you can't care more than they do because like you will burn out very fast.
Oh yeah.
And it's a really hard thing to like experience when you're like, I just want the best for them and I want them to like get better and like I can see where this is gonna benefit their life. And it's like the more you try to make them drink the water, like you're gonna drown them, or they'll just like fight you and they'll be like, not doing
Right.
it just
Yeah.
because you want me to.
I
I've
think
heard the term I've heard the term called idiot compassion before. That like you're just giving compassion, but like that's not what they need. And all you do is give all of your, energy to that person. And now you're both in dire straits.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we talked more. We always hear about clients breaking up with their therapist. I think we should see more therapists like letting go and saying, hey, like this is not working out. You are sitting in silence.
Right.
This is a waste of your money. I'm just making you more mad by talking. How about we take a month or two break and you come back when you are ready? Because I feel like some people might think that's like rude to the therapist, but it's also not fair to us to have to give all of our all to someone who is not trying at all when there's someone else who could be on a late wait list that does want to try. And I feel like
Yep.
sometimes what's best for a client is for us to break up with them and say, you can come back to me at any point in time. Like I'm always gonna be here. But right now it does not seem like you want therapy. And to make this work, you need to want to be here.
Yep.
Right.
And that's a hard conversation to have. But sometimes they need that.
Hmm. And sometimes another person can get there where I can't. That's
Mhm.
I've seen
Right.
that a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. They have like a perspective, like that open window that's pertaining to that. Not saying that you may not, but they might have a different approach to it.
Right. And it's also interesting to think like sometimes by them coming into counseling, that is like their biggest like making progress, like as much as they're able to like make the progress, like this is like the biggest step. And like by slowly like at a very, very, very slow like turtle pace, because not every client's gonna go like super quick. And some clients are be like, it's gonna be a harder, slower process. So like just for us to like obviously discuss this in supervision and like constantly like kind of understand the difference of the different clients and how like slow progress can still be progress and it just might take a little bit longer for them to like jump in full force. They might be like, okay, my toes are wet, now my foot's wet, now like I want to slowly walk into the pool.
Yeah.
So it's just there's gonna be a lot for us to like experience. But it's kind of nice kind of thinking about the what experiences we are like think like going to have in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we want to move on to 2.9?
Yeah.
Right. So 2.9, they asked about like the most common or most important psychosocial problems that throughout the different case
Mm-hmm.
studies that we've read. Um, so when I did it, like I went like, and then the second question was the most common environmental problem. So like, and then they kind of go through and they're like, oh, like, are there problems with the client's primary support group, educational or occupational problems, housing, economic or healthcare access problems, crime and incarceration problems. So then like I just went through each case study and what I realized that, and then after, when I went through each one, I'd put them down of where they like what problems they have, and I realized that like just about, I think every single one had problems with their primary support group, whether like the parents put them up for adoption, parents died,
Mm-hmm.
significant others died, or like abuse from the like primary support. So that's where I'm like, they definitely had a theme, I thought, with like the primary support issues.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's something I also noticed, and also like something I saw in the case studies we did for the quiz, and almost every single time I've ever seen a movie or a book that focus on different types of disorders, it's always the friend group that, well, not always friend group or parents or siblings. There's one default in this primary support group that causes someone to really crumble, and I think that just shows like how much those around us influence us, peer pressure us, and can make or break the difference between a happy environment and a not so happy environment is having someone to look forward to seeing versus having no one to look forward to seeing.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't see. I see now that you mentioned it, the community aspect of it and the people around them. What I had gotten as the most common was specifically uh, like grief and loss in some way that either who said the person's parents died. Sorry, that's my dog.
It's okay.
Parents died or were orphaned, or divorced or job loss or these things. But um, also, yes, the factors of the community around those people. Um,
Right. And I had a lot of like the crime or incarceration problems. It was mostly like I kind of put crime like loosely because then you had like um the like Maria's significant other being like killed.
Right.
So I had like
mhm.
there was quite a bit of like I guess criminal behavior that led to some of the problems. Not necessarily them themselves, but like what they were experiencing.
And their environment of where they're living, and if it's a high gang populated area or a high drug trafficking area.
So a
Right.
lot of consistent themes, I think, from my past. So I worked in substance abuse field for 14 years.
Huh,
Before
great.
this, I took a 2-year break to do this. Uh,
Nice.
so a lot of things that I found, and you all are expressing it completely with the same ideas here, is there's a lot of things that I feel like people felt like they couldn't overcome as far as not being able to get a good enough job or having support with family or individuals. There's a lot of things that are looked at negatively as finite situations. There are things that people just can't get through, which create this negative aspect on their life or their circumstance, or not being able to make money. So I got to do crimes to make money, and all these reoccurring situations of how a lot of those psychosocial problems are huge on the effect of even a diagnosable situation. They exacerbate it. They just impact it that much more because then
Right.
you get into defeating situations to where it's just going to be amplified. So,
Yeah, I specifically work mostly in corrections currently at the moment, and that kind of cycle is super present on the minds of the people that I because I've been to jail, and because of that, I can't make money, so I have to do what I have to do to make ends meet, and that sometimes lands me back in here, and the cycle.
Yeah.
The last question I had, what types of psychosocial and environmental problems do you expect your like your future clients to have?
Huh.
And I know it's just like personally, where I am is extremely rural and mental health is like such a stigma. So I definitely see like the lack of like primary support, whether it's like they're having some issues and if they went to someone and they kind of just blew it off, whether it's parents because parents are still like not a lot of parents in this area are not understanding of mental health. So I have a feeling it'll be a lot of like the primary support group problems there that will kind of lead to additional problems and then for people to end up into my counseling.
I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so I see myself having a lot of adolescents about to go to college because it's a very big thing either here. You're either going to Chapel, or you're going to NC State, or you basically failed out of high school. We don't care where you're going. And so I think I'm gonna see a lot of high schoolers that are struggling with their academics and then also just fitting in school. Because when I was in high school, we have about 5 or 6 high schools that aren't close, but you know a lot of people throughout all 6 high schools, and it was very hard to find your place and find actual friends because of how big the area is. I see a lot of myself having a lot of like kids struggling to fit in, finding their place, and transitioning from high school to college, and then young adults more than I do see older people.
So
Right.
I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and currently and in the future, uh, am working in like inner city area. And but I've also worked in rural areas, Shauna. And the thing that I've found that is so interesting is how many commonalities there are in the barriers for mental health in both of those places. In terms of mental health is not a thing that you talk about, in terms of community values and family values in many ways. Um, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of similar struggles, I think, for me that you just described with rural communities.
well, I think people sometimes don't even know how to support somebody, even if they care,
Yep.
where they don't have good support systems,
Yeah.
one or the other.
It's like a
Uh,
it's like a generational curse. Like, oh, this is how my mom and dad taught me, so I'm gonna be teaching you this. And that's
Right.
how my husband's dad is. He's very well, I will say he was a lieutenant. He was a retired cop, but when I tell you, when it came to any form of emotional awareness or some like intellectual incline of just like, being there for his son rather than just providing, he's like, nope, nope, don't say I love you, don't say. So the point of like, say if my husband were to struggle with mental health, it would be looked down upon so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, that's got me kind of hopeful. And I don't know if it's the same in rural areas, but there seems to be a shift in terms of accepting it more,
Yeah,
slowly but surely. Snail's pace, like we said.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's initiatives, but like we even have like there's big like advertisements and stuff for mantherapy dot com or dot org to try to get like the farmers and the um like factory workers to like if they need help like you can at least go here and it's anonymous and like because there's such a high rate of suicide for like specifically men in this area but because we don't talk like men can be happy or angry and that's only acceptable.
You're right.
So it's very interesting to like hopefully in the future we'll see that generational like that generational kind of like understanding of emotions change as like the younger individuals like and as we teach our younger individuals like it's okay for men to have emotions too like to
Right.
see if that'll change then the next generation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
helped along through the work of people like us.
Yeah, and that's why, because right now, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we enter Men's Awareness Month?
Is that June?
Is that June or is that May?
It is mental health aware like in
It is
general mental
June.
health.
My
Okay,
wife says
okay,
it's June.
okay,
Okay.
got it. But yeah, I think as a society, we've come more open to a lot of discussions, especially pertaining to mental health and actually exploring the boundaries that, it should be pushed against. It's not just against, oh, women experience mental health more than men. No, it just really it's due to socioeconomical backgrounds, their environments, how they were raised, and how it pertains to, a different manifestation of a diagnosis later.
We may feel more comfortable talking about it because that's the social norm. And
Yeah.
then I don't know if anyone's read the book A Little Life. It depicts men's mental awareness amazingly, but I think also that can scare men into talking about it because then they're like, well, I want people to think that I'm like this person in this book or I'm like that person in that movie. So women get more grace about it. So I think that's also what is hard is that in movies and portrayal, I see a lot of, and this could be just what I'm watching, it's always a lot of sexual assault against males. That's like what I see the most in the media.
Yes.
And men
Hmm.
might just not want to even have to enter that conversation. 'Cause that's what I see a lot of mental health stemming from in terms of me, which is why I don't understand why the media always just chooses sexual assault and men to be the one that portrays mental health. That's why I see the most. I think that men are also just scared to speak up because of how they're portrayed in media as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you
I
also
mean,
gotta realize too. Oh, my fault, Kyle. Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say it's certainly something that comes in mental health, right? Or in I'm sorry, in essay treatment. Sorry, um, that idea of I got to hold my emotions in, and so I'm going to use the substance to numb it because either I don't have the words to talk about it, or I don't have the support from the community to feel safe enough to talk about it. It's the thing that leads to that symptom in many ways.
Right.
Safe's the key word.
Well,
What
that's
is?
another great group discussion, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this was good. It was really in depth.
Mm.
Mhm.
All right. Next week.
Yeah, this
Do
week.
you want to end the recording?
Yeah. Where's that?